Good morning, Metalheads Unit. Welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown. And today we're looking at the latest album from Batushka entitled Hospodi. I'm 100% certain that I'm pronouncing both of those things incorrectly. This is the second studio album from Polish black metal band Batushka. Their first album was released in 2015, so we're going back a little bit. I don't think I heard it at the time of its release. Not even sure if Metal Meltdown was quite a thing just yet. But since then I've explored that record, and there's a lot of interesting stuff on there. Batushka notably take a lot of influence from the Eastern Orthodox Church, and their lyrics are written in the Old Church Slavonic language, and they use church bells and choirs and chanting in their music, and it does have a more religious, epic, almost ethereal kind of feeling to it. It's kind of like the more operatic tendencies of Ghost and Behemoth, infused with the vicious European black metal of a band like Rotting Christ. I think it's an interesting new aspect from black metal, one that strays from the traditional patterns and anti-religious rhetoric that we're used to seeing, but that's not really the main reason we're here. That's not really even the main reason that I dared to call this the most controversial album of 2019 in the title of this video. Oh no, the credit for all of that goes to some ongoing behind-the-scenes drama between a former member of Batushka and a current member of Batushka, and the record company that is unfortunately caught in the middle of all of it. Right before Christmas last year, founding member Drabakowski, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, once again probably not, I apologize, had announced that the band had kind of split up due to irresponsible and inappropriate behavior on behalf of their singer, whose name is Krysiuk. Definitely pronouncing that incorrectly. Drabakowski even claimed that Krysiuk was planning to take the band out from underneath his feet, which is interesting because a week after that, Krysiuk said something very similar and had announced that Drabakowski had been exiled from the band, saying that Drabakowski was told earlier this month that he would not participate in Batushka activities as we move into 2019, and that any pages operated by him were to be shut down based on a claim of, quote, based on intellectual property and trademark ownership. And ever since then, this has continued to unfold. This has gone to court. This has been debated online. Anthony Fantano actually just did a really amazing video summing up the entire situation if you want to take a look at it. And what it all essentially boils down to is that now we have two versions of Batushka. We have this version, which features Krysiuk releasing the album Hospodi, and we also have, quote-unquote, the original version, which features Drabakowski, and they released an album earlier this year, and the name for that, if I'm reading this correctly here, was Panahidia. We've seen these kinds of issues happen to lots of bands over the years. We've seen this happen with LA Guns and Queensryche most infamously. We've had some of the biggest names in hard rock and heavy metal disputing quite publicly, from Van Halen to the Misfits. You know, this kind of split, this kind of nasty separation, it's not unheard of. But what is unheard of is the response from Metal Blade Records, who not only have been remarkably silent on the release of Hospodi and the ongoing legal feuds within Batushka, but have actually gone out of their way to delete comments and worthwhile criticisms that were found on videos released by this version of Batushka. It's actually blatant censorship, if we're being honest. It's a lot to sink in, and I'm going to be honest, that legal drama immediately does kind of have an impact on this record. However, I'm going to try and not talk about it too much because, again, there are other people who already have, and frankly, they're doing a way better job than I ever could have. So I'm simply going to refer you to those videos, specifically the Anthony Fantano one, because I think he's done the best fucking job. Instead, what I want to focus on is how this relates to Hospodi, as well as the outcome of Hospodi as a whole, because this is the album that's backed by the larger label. This is the album that has more views and more plays at this point. This is the album that arguably kickstarted all of this, as Krysiuk was working up on this behind the scenes, behind Drabakowski's back, and this is what eventually led to that massive split. And with that in mind, let's get it right into it. My reaction immediately after listening to this album was, wow, just looking at it musically, all this fuss was for a whole lot of nothing. Like, I was seriously really underwhelmed by Hospodi. I was really underwhelmed. All the things that I had enjoyed about the Batushka record are present, but really toned down, and it's not quite as characteristic, it's not quite as confident, it's not quite as evil and mystic and well performed. It's still a pretty competently performed melodic black metal record, but it's nowhere near as unique as that first record, and that is immediately a bit of a killjoy. Church bells and a lot of really cathartic religious chanting can still be heard across the record, and they make for some great atmospheric effects. And as far as I can tell, the lyrics are still written in the Old Church Slavonic language. But ultimately, what you're still getting here is a pretty by-the-books melodic black metal record. You know, it's got the tremolo riffing, it's got those nasally vocals, it's got the blattering blast beat drums. It's really fucking repetitive. A lot of the songs tend to rehash riffs and ideas, and they get stretched out to unbearable levels as some tracks go on for 2 entire minutes before introducing any vocals or any new riffs, meandering on very simple blackened heavy metal sections. Take for instance the third track, which I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce, which very quickly settles into a pretty by-the-books kind of ghost-style riff that continues just beyond the 1 minute and 30-second mark before divulging into a pretty standard black metal section, which itself is frankly heavily repeated until pretty much the last third of the track. The same thing can be said for the second track, which opens on a really ambient note and sticks on that note for quite a bit before again evolving into a pretty standard kind of black metal jam, although I do like some of the religious chantings on here. I think it gives everything a really powerful kind of mystic energy to it. I don't know, man. I just got really bored with this record really quick. And then when I started to do some more homework and some more research into the other Batushka record that has also come out recently from Drabowski, as well as rethinking the entire situation with Metal Blade Records, it kind of hit me just how much lazier and incompetent this record is in some ways. The other Batushka record, Panahidia from Drabowski, frankly speaks for itself. It better implements all of the ideas and sounds that I think people who love that debut album are looking for. It's more engaging, it's more characteristic, it's more unique, not quite as well produced as this album, but it is overall probably a stronger record, and I would much rather go back to that. And on top of that, you have Metal Blade Records, who are being really kind of cynical and greedy about this whole situation, not even addressing it formally, just removing any negative opinion or comment regarding this version of Batushka. I would not be shocked, for that matter, if I somehow got some kind of flag about it at this point. Maybe Krysiak had some kind of vision for Batushka that Drabowski just wasn't willing to work on with him. Maybe that's why this whole thing happened. Maybe that's why Krysiak decided to basically steal the band out from under Drabowski. Like, maybe he genuinely did have good intentions for this band and this album. I mean, it certainly doesn't sound impassionate, but the outcome, it clearly just isn't worth it. It feels kind of cynical. It's not quite as unique. It's not quite as powerful. And I would probably give this a 2 out of 5. Tempted to go lower, mostly despite Metal Blade Records, but I can't blame this version of Batushka for Metal Blade Records' extremely poor handling of the press surrounding this album. I simply can't. That's not on Batushka. But I can, however, blame them for releasing an album that, while certainly shows moments of inspiration and originality, ultimately comes down to being kind of bloated and trite and repetitive and generic. And that, to some extent, is maybe the worst part, is that this all had to happen for an album that ultimately isn't really all that special. I mean, sure, there are some new ideas, but all of these ideas are better explored on either of the other two Batushka records, making this an incredibly inessential listen unless you somehow just really fucking despise Drabowski and you 100% stand behind the decisions that Metal Blade Records have. I mean, if that's the case, I won't stop you. I don't know these people personally, but again, just from the information I have right now, I think it's safe to say that Drabowski's a good guy, and Metal Blade Records and this Batushka have seriously fucked up. 2 out of 5, an incredibly messy, controversial situation resulting in a pretty by-the-books, unimpressive, and ultimately forgettable album. Sorry. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.